If you've been craving more sugar than usual, especially after the holidays, please do not jump straight to shame. Sugar cravings are not a willpower issue. Your body is simply communicating with you, and when you understand what it's saying, everything changes. The holidays shift your gut bacteria, your cortisol rhythm, your blood sugar, your sleep, and even your emotional bandwidth. Of course, your cravings feel louder right now. That's not a lack of discipline, it's physiology. Today, I'm going to help you understand the real root cause of those cravings, whether it's your gut microbiome, your hormones, or your nervous system asking for support. And by the end, you'll know the first simple steps to calm those cravings without restriction or guilt. By the way, if you're new here, hi, I'm Janell Yule, and this is the Transformation Show, where we break down what the body is really trying to tell you so that you can support it with more confidence, more clarity, and more compassion. So let's dive in. Let's begin with the most common misconception that cravings equal failure. So, have you ever told yourself or heard someone else say, if I just had more discipline, I wouldn't crave sugar? So, why do women believe this? Well, there's cultural conditioning, for one. There is the January reset pressure that we talked about on last week's episode. There is a misunderstanding of biology and physiology when it comes to sugar cravings. And there is often a learned shame loop around food, which I call the shame spiral. So if you have ever said, I'm, going to stop eating sugar or I'm not going to overeat during the holidays, only to find yourself in that position, often we spiral into shame. We spiral into this part of us that believes that we are actually not capable of change. And I'm here to tell you that you absolutely 100% are capable of change. So here's the truth. The truth is cravings are simply communication, and they're rooted in gut microbiome shifts, cortisol swings, and nervous system dysregulation. So let's start with the gut. So after the holidays, you could have what we would call gut dysbiosis because you've been eating more sugar and certain types of bacteria, certain pathogenic organisms feed off of this sugar. And so if you've been giving these specific microbes more sugar, then you're going to have more cravings because they don't want to starve to death. So they are signaling to your brain through the gut-brain connection. So we have this gut-brain access. So the gut is signaling back to the brain, eat sugar, eat sugar. So when you're having these really, really strong sugar cravings, again, this is not just a willpower issue. Now, the good news is you can reset specifically the gut level pretty quickly by doing a couple of strategic things. From a hormonal standpoint, cortisol either spikes or we have too little cortisol, and so then our blood sugar is unstable and we're probably not eating enough protein. The holidays, there's probably more carbohydrates, there's more sugar, maybe there's skipping meals. And so when you are not eating in a way that is very protein rich and very satiating, and satiating doesn't necessarily mean more food, it just means food that is going to keep you fuller longer, you can have more cravings. And then our sleep is impacting our hormones. So we have leptin, which is the master hormone in our body that tells our brain, it tells to let go of weight or to hold on to weight. And so if you are not sleeping or you have a lot of disrupted sleep, leptin is not able to dock in the brain at night. And so it's not telling your body, hey, we can let go of weight. And ghrelin is that satiety or that hunger hormone. And so when we are not sleeping, these hormones are impacted. So I would ask you, have you ever had a poor night's sleep or had to wake up really early and that entire next day you are craving more sugar? That is not an accident. That has nothing to do with your willpower. It has everything to do with your physiology. Okay. And then, not to mention the stress and how that has impacted your hormones. And so, if you are a menstruating female, you want to pay attention to your period this month because of more sugar, because of more stress, the disrupted sleep, everything I'm talking about, that will impact your menstrual cycle. And it will impact it because you maybe aren't producing as much progesterone because your body is actually taking it's shunting what it would normally use as the precursors to secreting progesterone or making progesterone and having enough progesterone so you have a calm mood and you're sleeping and you're feeling good to make cortisol because it thinks that there's threats there. And so if that was happening for weeks or even a couple months at the end of last year, you're going to notice that from a hormonal standpoint, and you may notice more intense symptoms around your period or just more symptoms in general. And then the nervous system. So when we are overstimulated, we have a desire for quick dopamine. And one of the ways that we can get quick dopamine is from processed foods and foods that are full of sugar. And so what your body is really seeking is safety. It's really seeking predictability. It's seeking routine. It's seeking rhythm. It's seeking settling back into that regulated state rather than the state of dysregulation that maybe was the end of last year and through the holiday season. So, examples of this or how this may look or show up is craving sugar at 3 p.m. because you've got this cortisol dip. And what can happen sometimes is that cortisol will dip in the afternoon. And then, what I will see often on hormone testing that I do is I will see someone get a second wind and they will have relatively elevated cortisol at night. And so they kind of get that second wind between 7 and 9, and that can negatively impact sleep. You're craving sugar at night. And oftentimes you're craving sugar at night for a couple different reasons. One is you're exhausted and you actually just need to go to bed or you need rest. And rest may not necessarily mean go to bed, but rest could be reading a good book. Rest could be yoga nidra or some light stretching. Rest could be taking a nice Epsom salt bath. So, what can you do to actually like restore your nervous system rather than what do we typically do is we mindlessly scroll on social media or we veg out in front of the TV. And don't get me wrong, those things, it's not that we're never going to do those things. I like to watch a good, show on Netflix as much as anyone, and we really want to think about what would actually be supportive for us. And then there's that emotional depletion that has happened. And so, you have been potentially giving for weeks, especially if you are what I call the magic maker for the holidays in your family. That is a lot. It's a lot to hold. And so you're probably experiencing some depletion, or maybe the holidays are challenging for you because of loss or because of transitions. Maybe you're in a transition season where your kids are transitioning and it looks different, or your kids are now adults and it looks different because of their relationships and dynamics that they have going on in their life. And so that can create a lot of emotions and that emotional roller coaster. The other thing that you maybe experiencing sugar cravings at night is because you're not eating enough at the beginning of the day. So if you are not really anchoring at the beginning of the day with enough protein, with enough fiber, and really supporting your blood sugar, you're going to have more cravings at night. And then you could be craving sugar after like social events, especially if you are someone who is more introverted or like I talked about on last week's episode, an omnivert. Sensory overload. I remember last month we went to a holiday party and it was wonderful, and the host was amazing. And there were a lot of people, and there was a lot of food, and there was a lot of lights, and there was a lot of music. And it is sensory, it is a lot. And so, in those situations, you want to try to reorient yourself. And then on the back end of that, how do you need to support yourself? Because coming home and eating more or scrolling or watching TV is actually just exacerbating what your nervous system just experienced. Okay. So this is not about your willpower. This is rooted in physiology. So what can you do? So a simple first step, morning light, get outside. We are going to talk a lot about circadian rhythm. We're going to talk a lot about your light environment. I'm going to share a lot more as we go on this journey. And it is really, really important. So you can find me and my husband, Justin, standing on our front step every morning at sunrise, bundled up a little bit because it's a little chilly right now in Minnesota. It is really, really important that you signal to your brain to bring on those hormonal programs. And it will help with sleep, it will help with energy, it will help with so many things. And you get this benefit whether it is cloudy, whether it is snowing, whether it is rainy, or whether it is sunny. You just want to make sure that you have naked eyes. So, what I mean by that is you do not want to have sunglasses on. You do not, actually, I don't wear sunglasses at all anymore. Conversation for another day. Uh, and you also do not want to have glasses on, and you don't want to have contacts in because that will block that UV light that you are so wanting. Okay. Adding protein and fiber in the morning within 60 minutes of waking. I promise you, minimum of 30 grams of protein. Honestly, I usually have about 50-ish grams of protein by about 7:30 in the morning, and it has been game changing for me. Like life changing, game changing when it comes to my energy, when it comes to my mood, when it comes to my body composition. And then adding some fiber from some vegetables, okay? Especially this time of year when fruit really is not in season. So if you don't have an appetite in the morning, you want to start small. Maybe you have a cup of bone broth, maybe you have a half a cup of cottage cheese, maybe you have a protein and water, and then that will buy you a little bit of time. And then about 60, 90 minutes later, then you have, your eggs, or you have your ground meat, or you have your roasted vegetables, or you have your egg bites, or whatever that looks like. And then you want to wake up hungry. You want to be hungry within 30 minutes of waking. And if you're not, it's a signal that your cortisol is dysregulated. Okay. Hydration. Remember to hydrate before you reach for sugar, because are you actually hungry or are you actually dehydrated? And maybe you drink enough water, but maybe you don't actually have enough minerals to actually be hydrated. And so you're still getting sugar cravings. And then create a pause between stimulus and response. And so when you feel that urge, so craving is an urge, when you feel that urge, ask the question, what is my body really asking for? Because more than likely, it's asking for a break. It's asking for some kind of attention. Maybe there's anxiety that's showing up. Maybe there's loneliness or boredom that's showing up. Maybe you're angry and you need to process that anger or express that anger. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you need connection. So likely it's asking for some sort of safety. It's asking for some sort of connection. It's not the food. I can promise you that. So pausing, create that pause, because we are moving through life so quickly. And if you can create that pause between stimulus and response, it's not about getting it perfect. It's not about never eating chocolate. It's not about never eating sugar. It's about really pausing and going, this isn't about the food. What do I actually need? And how do you meet that need in the moment? And maybe that is a micro moment where sometimes I just go and lay on the floor behind me for a minute or 5 minutes, to be honest, or 10 minutes sometimes. And that's just enough to bring my body, bring my nervous system back to regulation. It wasn't that I needed to eat something. Okay. So remember, cravings aren't failure, they're information. If today's episode gave you a new way to understand your body, I would love for you to stay connected. Share this episode with somebody who you know it will help. Subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you tap that bell icon so you don't miss what's coming next. And feel free to share your thoughts or questions in the comments. And for my podcast listeners, make sure that you hit follow so that you never miss an episode. And as always, have faith and take action.